Welcome to Thriving Rockstar with Alex Rakin. Today's guest is Amelia Rosenberger. How are you, Amelia?
I'm great. How are you?
Great, great. So Amelia's a unique guest here. Most of my guests have been rock musicians who tour and things like that. And Amelia is more of a classical musician, correct?
Yes, I am.
Yes, and a yoga teacher who teaches yoga for musicians.
hmm
How did that come about?
So, when I was in my undergraduate degree studying trombone performance, my piano professor, I was taking secondary lessons with a piano professor. He knew that I had more of a fitness background, and he mentioned, hey, my wife teaches yoga. You should check out one of her yoga classes. And his wife was also a phenomenal flute player. So I started going to her classes my freshman year of college and instantly fell in love with the practice. And on top of loving the physical practice of it, I started noticing all of these benefits that were affecting my life as a musician. And so yoga was helping me become way less stressed with all of the stresses that come with being a music major in college. And so stress was being reduced, and also performance anxiety was reduced a ton from all of the breathing practices that came with yoga. And so when I started noticing those benefits, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to share this with as many people as possible. So I eventually got my own yoga teacher certification and started teaching just to my friends in our music building some yoga weekly. And it became this thing in our music department where we had yoga for musicians classes every Sunday night. And I had a really great crowd of musician friends who were interested in yoga. And so that's how it got started. It was so fun because there was no pressure because they were all my friends teaching yoga. And I was still a new yoga teacher at that time, but I got to share all of the incredible benefits of yoga with my friends.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have a similar kind of story. I guess earlier in my 20s, I got into fitness and realized, how much that had affected me as a musician as well. And then I started to kind of naturally just talk about that with people I knew. And teaching guitar since, like, say, 16, I started talking about that with guitar students. And then the ones that started to apply the stuff that I discussed, just the insights that I had, it had helped them as well. So then I kind of came up with this thing called artist health coaching, and and so I did something like that, for a few years in a roundabout way. It was hard to, find the market and all that kind of thing.
Right.
But that's what that's what led me down the path to create this show. It was that, and then the entrepreneurial aspect of being a musician. And it's so important,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and most of the artists that I interview are touring, and on tour, it's just such a struggle to stay healthy. And so, that's why I brought you on the show. I felt like you'd be you'd give some great insight into, some things that, musicians can do in their lives, whether on or off tour or whatever they're up to.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. And, right now I'm in graduate school for trombone performance. And so I can imagine touring is just as intense as getting a music degree. And health is usually one of the first things that goes whenever you're either in school or you're in a really high pressure performance situation. You focus on so many other things to make sure your performance is great, but health goes out the window. And so this conversation of how can we keep ourselves healthy as musicians is so important, because when we're not healthy, we don't perform as well as we need to.
Right. And so what's your philosophy behind food? And how
food?
How do you eat? Yeah.
So I myself am vegetarian,
Okay.
and I have been for almost 3 years now. And as a yoga teacher, it's not necessarily within my scope of practice to tell people what to eat. I'm not a nutritionist.
Sure.
I don't have any background in that. But as a yoga teacher, I can encourage people to practice intuitive eating, which is really listening to how food makes you feel, tuning into your body and really paying attention to, when I eat this, this is how my body feels afterwards. So I became vegetarian primarily because of how certain foods were making me feel. And I realized that my body wasn't reacting as well as I wanted it to with certain foods that I was eating. And so I transitioned over to being vegetarian because I realized that these foods make me actually feel a lot better. So I would never like shove vegetarianism into someone's face. Yeah. But I would really encourage people to take the time to really tune into how food makes them feel. Sure. And it's also very important to not only pay attention to what it feels like when you're eating it, because I can eat this donut right now and it tastes amazing and I love every bit of it, but 30 minutes from now, is my body really going to feel that good? So it's also about how your body feels after you eat whatever product you're eating.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very important point, because a lot of people, they they'll eat foods, they'll enjoy them, but then they'll be crashing throughout the day and they'll have inconsistent energy, or have a foggy mind, and they won't realize how much that's connected to what they eat.
Yeah.
And to be extremely cliche, you are what you eat. And quite fundamentally, I mean, like, your body's cells are constructed of the nutrients in the food that you're eating. And
yeah,
so
absolutely.
If your food is void of nutrients, then it's just that's what what is your body, what's your body going to build its cells out of? It's just not going to work right. And certain foods have a lot of toxins and things that are very difficult for your body to absorb. So I can see how a vegetarian approach is definitely helps remove a lot of those things and encourage a lot more nutrient dense foods.
Yes. And I do encourage for my yoga students especially to drink as much water as possible. I think that's very important to stay hydrated. I think we live in an age where people are chronically dehydrated more than they should be, because we have so many other options of great things to drink, but that's not hydrating you as well as water does. So water's number one on that list for me.
And how do you go about drinking your water? Do you like kind of carry a canteen with you?
It's right here. It's always with me. I have a 32-ounce water bottle that literally goes everywhere with me. And it's funny because I'm in this habit of carrying it around everywhere, and I start walking into restaurants with it and set it on the table. And it's like, oh, I don't need to have this in here because they're about to give me a glass of water. But I take it around with me literally everywhere, just out of habit.
Do you have a policy of like how much of it you need to drink? Like, just to upkeep hydration?
No, I don't. But I think I probably drink 3 of these a day. So quite a lot of water. I fill it up as often as I can whenever I see a water fountain at school, especially. And when I'm teaching, I drink so much water because I'm talking so much during my yoga classes when I'm teaching. So I'm just constantly chugging water to stay hydrated.
Yeah, I mean, as a yoga teacher, you're not only just speaking, you're doing the motions with them while speaking. That's a lot.
Absolutely. It's the physical plus the teaching. And so it's very taxing on the body, and it can be difficult if you don't take care of yourself in the process.
Sure. And most of your teaching is done earlier in the day or later in the day?
Actually, later in the day. I've been teaching yoga for almost 5 years, and my schedule has fluctuated so much, but 2 years ago, if you had asked me, all my classes were in the morning. I taught 6 a.m. classes every single day. And now I've transitioned, just because of the studios that I teach at. The classes that I were given are all in the evening. So I teach 8 yoga classes a week, and most of them are in the evening. I teach a couple 10 a.m.s, but to me, 10 a.m. is so late in the day. It's like luxurious. I get to sleep in. It's great.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
When do you wake up normally?
When do I wake up normally? Right now, it's probably around 8 in the morning every day. And with graduate school, my schedule was very chill, and I didn't have most of my classes were in the afternoon. So my mornings were completely free. I would go to classes in the afternoon and teach yoga in the evening. So I really got to experience having an open morning in my schedule this year for the first time ever. I mean, for the all the rest of my life, I have been going to school in the morning. So it was really nice to be able to have a year where I kind of figured out a morning routine for myself and prioritizing the things I really want to do first thing when I wake up, like eat a healthy breakfast or practice yoga or meditate or just have time to myself to prepare for the day. Sure. That was a really nice transition this year for me.
I think that really helps you own your day when you can get up in the morning. And there are people who are, in this, let's say working 9 to 5 or maybe going to school, but they have kind of a thing that they have to do starting at 8, 9 in the morning, and they wake up right before that, and then they go do that thing, and then they end up consumed by that, right? But then there are those who will get up extra early just so they can have that time to themselves, and I think it's so important.
Yeah.
Like setting your
intentions. I've definitely been in many days of my life that person that wakes up right before I have to do the thing, go to class or teach the class, and it's frazzling, and I don't feel as centered as I want to be going into whatever situation that is. And it's funny because I was trying to figure out, well, how much time do I need before said events in the morning to center myself and prepare myself for the day. And I found out when I have endless amount of time, I could spend that entire time just focusing on my health and me time. So that has been kind of inconsistent because I will spend 4 hours in the morning taking my time and moving as slowly as possible to make the beginning of my day as full and mindful as possible. Sure. So it's kind of funny. Maybe I should narrow it down to just an hour or something, but
yeah, you get more efficient after a while, But I think it's important to do those things and to kind of prepare and to own your day, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's like you create good momentum that, carries on throughout the day. You make a few good choices right away, and that tends to accumulate.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's that momentum. So yeah, on that, like, we may as well discuss the other half of your day, right? So how do you wind up? So first of all, let's just not skip over the meditation part, because I think that's an integral part of this. Yeah. Right. So mindfulness and yoga go hand in hand, and you meditate, right?
I do. Not as consistently as I would like to. But I think that meditation comes in an endless amount of forms. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes meditation for me looks like sitting on a meditation pillow for 20 minutes. Sometimes meditation for me is driving in the car and just taking a second to find my breath. It can even just be one breath. And those 5 seconds of tuning into my breath can be a meditation practice as well. So when I have the time and I can sit down and I can actually be in a quiet place where I'm undisturbed, that's great. Sometimes I don't find that time in my schedule. And so I try to find space to breathe, like when I'm driving or when I'm walking to class, just to be present. And
mindful moments.
Yes, mindful moments. And I think that's just as important as sitting down and being still with yourself.
Sure. I think a lot of yogis and meditators talk about meditating without ceasing, and I think that's the idea. Whenever you in any situation you have a space, you can fill that with being mindful and present and bringing yourself to center. So that's I think it's a great practice for people, and it's helpful in practicing. So being a musician, how has this stuff personally translated to your own practice?
Yeah, that's a very big question, especially with the meditating aspect of it. I, in my undergraduate degree, experienced a trombone-related injury that I had to work through. And so I had this neck injury that was creating a lot of pain for me whenever I was playing my instrument. And I ended up getting so burnt out in my undergraduate degree and barely making it through my senior recital, and I was in so much pain that right after my undergraduate degree, I decided I have to take time off. And so I took an entire year off of playing my instrument. It was locked away in its case in a basement. I didn't touch it. I didn't look at it for an entire year. And it was really what I needed personally to get over being so burnt out and all of the negative emotions that I had towards my instrument, because at that point in time, trombone equaled pain. And every time I touched my instrument, and it got to the point where every time I thought about my instrument, it would create this reaction in my body where I would just tense up because I had so many negative feelings towards my instrument. But I was stubborn and I knew I wanted to get back to playing eventually. I mean, music is my life and such an incredible passion of mine. And so when I finally got back to playing my instrument again, I completely approached playing in a meditative sense. Playing my instrument was purely meditative, and that's all that I wanted it to be for about a year. So I took 2 years off of college before I went back for my graduate degree. And the first year was me not playing at all. And the second year was me slowly over the course of a year, getting back up to the playing level where I had been when I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And the way I approached my instrument was that it was completely mindful. It was all about meditation. I mean, the first month was it was just me picking up my instrument and holding it and breathing with it.
Wow. And
being okay with that, because that was difficult for me. And I knew that if I pushed past where I was comfortable at that point, then I could have gone back to that really horrible burnt out feeling.
Wow.
So it sounds kind of silly, but it's really what I needed in order to ensure that I had a healthy relationship with my instrument moving forward so it could sustain for the rest of my career. So yeah, I started off with just picking up my instrument, breathing, and trying to disconnect from this negative thought pattern that trombone equaled pain. And so I really worked psychologically with my instrument, and meditation was the biggest tool for that. I don't think I could have done it without meditation. And then it slowly transitioned into me picking up my mouthpiece and buzzing for maybe like a minute, that then transformed into 5 minutes over the next few weeks. And then it got to the point where I was playing the first notes on my instrument again. And when I played, I made sure that I was not attached to what it would sound like, because I knew I'd not been playing for a year. It's not going to sound as great as I want it to, because I'm getting back into the skill. And so trying to practice non-attachment through meditation that way. And over the course of a year, I slowly worked my way back up to playing full time again. And now still, when I pick up my instrument, it's breathing first and thanking my instrument for this journey. It's very silly, but it's what's helping me create this positive relationship with my instrument. And then when I play, it's meditative, and I try to play as effortlessly as possible, so I don't go back to tension within my body or negative association with my trombone within my body and my mind. Right.
It sounds like your undergrad put a lot of pressure on you in physically, mentally, and with the trombone.
Physically, definitely, yeah. And it, what happened was I was playing with a slightly incorrect posture, and
that
this
compounded.
Yes. And so that's why I'm so passionate about yoga, because yoga is all about alignment. And if I can help other musicians find correct alignment within their body, I'm hoping that I can help other musicians prevent injuries from happening. Or if they're feeling or experiencing tension within their body, I can help them relieve that, because most tension that you hold within your body is from sustaining a position of misalignment in your posture.
Sure.
So for me, it was my neck jutting forward, which you see so often with wind instrumentalists, and tilting slightly to the side. And so you can imagine, since my head's not stacked correctly, all of the muscles in my neck were having to overwork to hold up my head. And so now when I practice, it's all about the alignment here and making sure that my ears are stacked over my shoulders and I'm not manipulating my head and my neck in any direction that's going to take it out of center.
Right. And that you know, that's a beautiful thing. Yoga is the meditation of the body.
Yes.
And you know, I think it's your journey is inspiring in a few ways, right? So it's one thing, you took your time, you really took your time, and you took a very long-term perspective. And slowly restructured your way of playing around effortlessness.
Yes.
Have you heard of effortless mastery, Kenny Werner?
I have, but I haven't done my research.
I might have him on the show at some point, but the idea is like, Kenny, well, he has this book, Effortless Mastery, and he talks about, he walks you through a guided meditation about playing effortlessly and visualizing yourself in Carnegie Hall, you know, just like watching yourself play along with the audience in a way, right? That kind of experience. Actually, yesterday I had some students that I was kind of teaching to play effortlessly, you know, and I teach guitarists to shred. And most musicians at the beginning, at least students who are trying to increase their speed and trying to gain that high level of technical facility, they're thinking that they have to push through tension to do it, and it's quite the opposite. As a matter of fact, a lot of my playing, I went through some of that same process where I had to kind of go back to very slow tempos and then just do that effortlessly and mindfully of every muscle involved. It's really every muscle in the body, right? Because I tell people, if you have like, you know, so tension in your lower back or leg or something, it's going to affect you, even your wrist, you know, so everything is connected. And so having them do something simple and then just all the while just be mindful of the smallest things and not holding tension anywhere, and even holding the pick with minimum necessary tension, right? They hold the pick just enough so it doesn't fall out, you know. And I'm sure, you know, drums is the same way with the sticks, and in your case with the trombone and a lot of those instruments, it's like you need to approach it with the minimum necessary tension.
Absolutely. And so for trombone, it's not necessarily playing super fast licks, right?
Sure.
Because we have a slide and we can't move as fast as someone with, you know, strings or valves or anything can move. For me, it was how loud I was expected to play as a brass instrumentalist. And so 8 years of marching band, standing on a field, blasting my face off, and then playing in wind ensemble situations where you're playing as loud as possible, as often as possible to sound impressive. And I was doing that in a way where I was creating tension in order to push that sound out. And so that had so many negative effects on my body. So I had to learn how to create that same sound without the tension. And that was a process for sure. But now I can play as loudly as I want to without feeling my body tense up in the process. And the sound's actually better because I'm not holding tension in my body. That's
amazing. Yeah, you completely like restructured your approach to the instrument. And you know, when I'm teaching younger students now, or any student, I try to teach them with that approach of like approaching the instrument without the tension and without any of that. So that's great. And the fact that you have this mindfulness before you even play, that's an important aspect as well, because you're preparing yourself to practice mindfully.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like having a mini meditation before you start. I've suggested students to do that very thing where they just kind of, I'm like, sit and just breathe for a minute. before you play, especially if you're coming back from a hectic day of work or school. You're just going to have all this built up in you, and then when you pick up the instrument and you run into something that'll make you impatient, you're going to go at it with tension, or you're going to get frustrated, and just not is a recipe for disaster. So just to slow down. Mm-hmm.
And I think that some students, that thought of even sitting still for a while is so foreign and so scary and not accessible at all. So it's important to also know that mindfulness doesn't have to look like this, monk sitting on top of a mountain very still.
Right.
We can have a much more modern approach to it. And for me, that often looks like very gentle movements where I'm still incorporating my breath. So on top of the mindful meditation that I do before playing my instrument, I also take, 3 minutes at max to just do some gentle neck stretches, to roll my shoulders around and just make sure my body is relaxed as well. And the breath is incorporated in both, right? The breath is incorporated in sitting still and finding your breath, but when you're moving and doing this gentle movement as well, you are breathing as deeply as possible. And all of that is preparing your body to be in the best place possible to play your instrument.
Got it. And now, so before you go out, like let's say for performance, right? Mm-hmm. What's your pre-performance ritual? Like what do you do before that?
Yeah. So I think, especially for performance anxiety, because we all experience that to some degree, right?
Oh yeah. I've run to the bathroom.
The biggest tool that we have as musicians is our breath. Mm-hmm. And the breath is so powerful because what happens when you experience performance anxiety is your parasympathetic nervous system is engaged, and that's our fight or flight mode. And we're not necessarily in this dangerous situation, but our body is reacting as if we were. And so we have that instinct of, I need to do something because this is not a situation that I'm comfortable with. And so that can, manifest itself with your heartbeat increasing or sweating or your mind racing. And the way to reverse that and get rid of all of those symptoms is with your breath, because deep breathing engages the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of that. And so before a performance, I take my time to do breathing techniques that I've learned through yoga practice. There's a really, really great one that's called alternate nostril breathing. Mm-hmm. And it's an incredible way to slow down my breath and really tune into the physical aspects of my breathing. And when I do that, my heart rate slows down. Mm-hmm. I get shaky sometimes before a performance, and it allows my body to release some of that tension, so I'm not as shaky. And it also centers my mind, and I can really focus on the present task at hand, which is performing music, other than all of those external thoughts that pop in when we're performing.
Oh, of course, like people, like what are they thinking, and all of those things. Like the really difficult parts coming up, don't mess up. And then if you mess up, you go in this downward spiral of negative thoughts, right? Mm-hmm. So meditation teaches you that focus that you need when you're performing. It's the same thing. Meditating, focusing on your breath, performing, focusing on your music. It's the same part of your brain that's activated. And meditation can help us increase that focus part of our brain. So performing is more productive and more enjoyable. How long do you meditate prior to performing?
It depends. So in 2015, I was so fortunate to be able to compete in a national trombone competition. And that was probably one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. And that was the very beginning of my neck injury as well. So I remember right before that performance, I felt horrible. I remember going up to my professor and saying, my neck hurts so bad. Wow. I don't know what to do. And he was just like, you have to get through this performance. And luckily I wasn't a yoga teacher at that point, but I had the yoga background enough to know that, okay, well, yoga makes me feel better, so I need to do yoga right now. And I think that before a performance, musicians can often just try to run through everything that they're about to play and overwork themselves and overperform before the actual performance happens, because we get in this cycle of doubt, and you're like, well, if I just play it one more time, then I know it'll be good during the performance. So I resisted that urge of, okay, well, I just need to go play for like 10 more minutes and then I'll be fine. And I went into a practice room and I did 30 minutes of yoga, and it was moving and breathing. And that is what got me through that performance.
Wow.
Now, for more relaxed performing situations, like wind symphony concerts that are, in a large ensemble and it's not as high pressure, it's not a solo performance, I'll probably do, 3 minutes. It doesn't have to be long, of alternate nostril breathing before I walk on stage. And it also depends on how I feel that day. Like if my body is really tight, then I know I need to do a little bit more to relax before a performance. So it's different every time.
Yeah. So that's great insight, and it's interesting how it parallels the last interview I had with Ray Hearn, the drummer of Haken. They toured the world, and he was very. He would come out. Well, first of all, he would think that he would need like 90 minutes of warm up before coming out on stage, and he realized that's kind of like burning him out. And then he started warming up less and less, and then he started realizing, you know what? Started stretching, and the stretching was helping more than the warming up.
Wow. Yeah.
So, first of all, I just read a book, very, very good book that was recommended to me, The Inner Game of Tennis. You know about the book, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, talking about self one and self two, and the self one is that conscious mind trying to bear control over the body and all that. And then the self two is just the one that knows, and it's really your subconscious mind or your autonomic nervous system who's already programmed to do this correctly, and you kind of just need to trust it.
Yes, trust.
yeah, and then just and that's a big deal, because I would be stuck in the same situation when my band's touring, where I feel like I need to warm up constantly and all of that, but really what was most effective is when I started to kind of take some time, like 15 minutes, to meditate in the green room. And that worked much better. And when I came out on stage, I wasn't thinking about like all of the things that could stress me out and having that negative thought loop. It was more of like, wow, this is great. I look at the people, I'm happier, I'm much more there and appreciative of the experience. The shakiness would go away, and I could actually just be with them.
You were present.
I was present, and I could actually enjoy the experience.
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very important thing, how to prepare yourself for that kind of thing. How do you wind down after you perform?
After I perform? It's the same thing. If for some reason the performance was really taxing or strenuous in any way, I feel kind of that tension in my body after perform again. So I make sure I take the time to release all of that, so it doesn't carry with me any longer than it needs to. So the ultimate goal, right, is to get to the point where you're not feeling any of that, but that's almost unrealistic because something's going to happen. And so just knowing that you have the tools to release that, I think, is the most important.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have a practice, right, of meditating, of yoga, or of anything that really kind of can calm the mind and the body down in order to maintain relaxed and focused performance, right? So part of your whole mission here, is to bring yoga into the music world and to create a healthy, sustainable career without pain. And right. And so, how did you come about that?
We are seeing so many musicians right now that are overworking themselves, getting burnt out, experiencing pain while they're playing their instrument. And if that's not taken care of right away, that can transform into either an injury or getting so burnt out that you don't want to ever play your instrument ever again. Right. We see that often. I see that in musicians just in their undergraduate degree. being a music major is so intense and such high demand that people by their third or fourth year hate being a musician and just drop it completely. I have so many friends that graduated with a music degree and do nothing related to music now because they were so burnt out and just had such a negative experience with all the high pressures of being a musician in a music institution. And so my goal is with music, or with yoga for musicians, I can help people sustain a healthy relationship with their bodies, with their minds, with their instruments, so that they aren't getting injured, they're not getting burnt out, and they can have a sustainable, long-lasting career.
Yeah.
And what often happens is you're young, you're touring, you've got the gig, you're doing the thing, it's great, but you're not paying attention to your health. And like, you're young, so your body can handle it. But in 20 years, it's going to catch up to you. And so we're seeing orchestral musicians who, you know, have been in the symphony for 20 years, but now can't play their instrument. Or, you know, the same situation can happen with musicians who are out touring. It's going to catch up to you eventually, and your body's going to eventually, you know, very much let you know that this is not sustainable. And so practices like yoga can help you find that balance within your body and sustain health within your body, and so that you are always in your best state possible to perform, and you're not going to experience all of these negative side effects later down the road.
Sure. And the stuff you're talking about is exactly where, you know, what I hear from rock musicians, you know, going out there and you know, tour life is very tough, you know, especially...
I can imagine.
Yeah, especially early in the game before you really get a following and your band grows. I mean, you're sleeping in a van like that. Like, there's a lot of that very... say unideal situations that can ruin your health. You know, you're out there for weeks to months, you know, with on low sleep, on bad food, you know, and of course, you know, chronic, you know, sitting constantly, and you know, and then comes party lifestyle and all that comes with that, you know, and so it just they're burning the candle at both ends, and you know, and then once their career, you know, maybe from all of that and from, well, at least the constant attention to their career and to touring, maybe they've built a following, but then they've already had some irreversible, you know, career shortening health damage, you know, and so that's just what I hope to do with this show. Is like what I you know, I'm interviewing people who've been at it for a while, and also those who are more earlier in the game and that have fresh insights. But those who have experience, you know, constantly say, it's like, okay, yeah, I used to party, I used to do this, and now I'm eating healthy, and now I'm getting up and having fiber, and you know, because constipation's a big thing on the road.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, all of these kinds of insights, so they could extend their careers and ultimately keep giving their gift to people. Yeah.
I love how much people are starting to talk about musicians' health, and I think we're finally realizing how important it is. I mean, 20 years ago, it was such a stigma to talk about this stuff, and especially in the classical world with injuries. I mean, if you had an injury and you were a classical musician, you did not talk about it, because that affected your reputation, it affected the gigs that you would get, and it affected the way that people thought about you as a musician. And so people kept to themselves that I'm in a lot of pain while I'm playing, because they didn't want it to affect their careers, which of course that didn't lead anywhere positive. And so now I see so many people talking about how important health is, and I love it, because the more we talk about it, the more we'll be aware of it, and the more that people like us will be able to share to everyone ways to create that sustainable career and be a healthy musician.
Surely. Yeah, no, and I hope this continues to grow, and that people grow mindful. And another aspect of health is mental health, right?
Yeah.
And physical health and mental health are closely related, because of course, you know, what you eat will affect you on a mental level. emotional level and psychologically, but also, what you think about yourself and about your career, and also dealing with the things outside of being a musician, and dealing with the fact that we're not exactly in a career that is reputable for being the most sustainable financially.
Right.
So there are a number of challenges that could affect a person's well-being, emotionally and mentally. So what's your philosophy? How do you maintain your mental health?
Wow. Well, all of that is so true. And what happens with, I think, everyone is that we let those external life factors affect our performing. And musicians, I would consider us healers, because we perform and we are connecting to an audience that receives some type of benefit from what we are doing. Mm-hmm. But if you consider us as healers, if we ourselves are not feeling as emotionally stable or physically healthy as we should, then that's affecting what we put out into the audience.
Right.
And so, oh my gosh, mental health is so important, because you need to be in a good place in order to give that to the audience as well. Mm-hmm. So non-attachment is my biggest thing with that. So much can be happening in your life where there's all of these external things, all of these external stressors, situations that are bogging you down. And it's all about learning how to let those go and be fully present with what you're doing. And so maybe school life is super stressful, or home life is super stressful, or financial life is really stressful. But when you're playing music, none of that matters.
Right.
And you have to be able to fully let go, be non-attached to all of those external things, and be really, really, truly present with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And that's, non-attachment is such a practice that takes a lot of practice and effort and consistency to learn how to use that to your advantage. And that's something that, I'm still in the process of learning. But even just the few years that I've been practicing non-attachment and really allowing myself to let go of those negative thought patterns or negative stressors that are in my life, I've found that it's helping me in every aspect of my life, not only as a musician, but as a teacher, and just like sitting in traffic, I'm not as irritated as I used to be 5 years ago. Really knowing that whenever there's chaos around you, there's a place within you, if you can just find it and be present, that is unaffected by all of that. You can always find calmness and peace within yourself, no matter what is happening elsewhere in your life.
Right. And what you said, being in that place of non-attachment, paradoxically, when you don't worry about all those issues, you perform better, and thus your career improves and your situations improve.
Yes.
The very situations you were so worried about will actually cease to be issues ongoingly, so it's you improve it by not worrying about it.
You have to let go of the expectations, and that can be long term, but very short term is when you're actually performing, right? Mm-hmm. We have these expectations that we build up in our mind of how our performance is supposed to go.
Right.
And if we can let go of those, then that's when we get rid of those negative thoughts that pop in our minds, and we can actually enjoy our performing as it's happening, because we are fully present. If something goes wrong, whatever, because we weren't expecting it to go perfectly. And so we're able to let that go in the moment and move forward, instead of clinging on and attaching to, oh my gosh, I just messed up. What is that person thinking? What is the band thinking? And we can move forward and continue to be present with our performing.
Right. Amelia, you touched on something before that I'm very passionate about. And the idea that what you put out there, we're healers, right? And that, our music is so therapeutic to people. And especially for musicians who write music with words, um, where you're coming from and where you are as a person and what you put into that material that so many people can possibly consume, especially for rock musicians playing like a style of music that, you know, could really make it out there and people take to heart, right? Teenagers and people susceptible to taking in that message. And if you're coming from a place of pain and from that's not self-resolved, you know, it could be like putting out toxins, right? And you know, conversely, if you're in a place where you're connected and you have a strong message and you put that out there, you know, that's we're sharing with that with the world, and we have a responsibility to put something that's great and that'll improve the world and that, you know, can have a strong impact in a positive direction for people. So
it's interesting about, you know, especially with lyrics and speaking about painful situations. I don't think that we shouldn't speak about painful situations, but I think it has to come from an authentic, genuine place, right. Because that type of music is very relatable to so many people. Of course. But yeah, you're right. It needs to come from a good place.
Right. I mean,
a place where you want to help other people by being relatable.
Right. There's a very different thing with, you know, speaking about a negative experience from a point of cynicism, where it's just like things won't get better, you know, and that kind of thing, or just like, you know, this thing sucks, but you're strong, you know? So, you know, and then that can imbue people with, you know, like real hope or strength, and it's helped, you know, music is just like one of the best therapies out there. So, you know, being in a good place as a musician or striving to, you know, be connected to your own sense of well-being and taking care of yourself is not only important for you, but it's important for everyone around you.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that's definitely something that, you know, I'm pretty passionate about. So I'm glad you hit on that. As far as relationships in your life, right? How have those played a role around you being a musician and a yoga teacher?
Yeah. So I come from a very musical family. My grandma was a professional opera singer and taught voice at a university in New York for many, many years. My mother is an incredible organist, and she's been a professional organist for over 25 years. Most of my family have backgrounds in singing and are incredible singers. And so growing up, I mean, I heard my mom playing organ from when I was in her belly, and my dad singing in the church choir, and I started playing piano when I was 3 or 4. Not taking lessons yet, but just like being able to tinker around on the piano. And so music was always a huge part of my life. And it was always just an accepted fact that I would join band when I was in 6th grade, and I would be in choir in church whenever I could. And so that's never something that I had to think about or a choice I had to make. It was just, I'm a musician because everyone else in my family is a musician. And then, you know, in high school, I started thinking about, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I was toying between being a landscape architect and a musician. So random. And so I had an incredible trombone teacher when I was in high school, and he's in the Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra, and he was so inspiring to me, and he was such an incredible teacher and such an incredible musician. I just wanted to be exactly like him. And so I decided early on in high school that music is the route I'm going to go down. I want to pursue music when I'm in college. And so he has always been an incredible factor in, you know, what I'm doing as a professional musician. And now with yoga, I mean, my first yoga teacher was a musician also. So I was always, you know, in the presence of musicians that were passionate about health as well. And my family is so supportive of what I do, which I know I'm very lucky, because I know that there are lots of families that don't see music as a legitimate career. They're worried about the income because it's not as financially stable as going and getting a 9-to-5 job with benefits and all of that. But my family has always been incredibly supportive of me choosing to follow my career as a musician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can't be.
I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel very fortunate.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very important. And that's a recurring theme at every interview I've done so far. Either they were very supportive or they just didn't get in the way.
Yeah.
or discouraged, right? Because it's important to surround yourself with people who will be supportive of what you want to do, especially if it's something that goes against the grain societally or career-wise.
Yeah, and it's very scary and terrifying to be going into this yoga for musicians career path, because it doesn't really exist as an accepted career path yet. It's not an actual job, and so since it's very new and it's only now starting to become something that you can use as a career, I'm very, very fortunate to have so many people in my life that are very supportive of that and encouraging.
Right. Now, on the business end of things, right? That's, I think what you're doing. It seems like you're walking an untreaded path, but realizing the fact that that is a niche, and a niche that can really help people. It's meaningful to you. It's so meaningful to you, and
Absolutely.
has such a deep root in your own experience. But also, it's something that is, it's extremely helpful for people. And I think you won't have a problem finding your audience. And in the few months that you've been, growing yourself on social media and stuff like that, you're growing, right? So it's just a matter of applying, stronger, ongoingly stronger marketing techniques and testing things, seeing how they work, and kind of doing little analyses of like, okay, maybe I should do a little bit more of this. This is more effective, spend 80% of the time on the 20% of the things that are bringing the results and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, I think that the response speaks for itself. I have had such an incredible response with everything that I've been doing. And it's really only been 3 or 4 months that I've been putting my content out there. And the fact that people are responding so well to it means that it's so needed in the music community. Right. And especially in the brass world. Most yoga for musicians teachers that I've met have been flute players, which is incredible because, they have this, I think they have a better intuition with their health and wellness than probably the average brass player does. I'm stereotyping, but there aren't as many health advocates in the brass world yet. And so, especially in the trombone world. And so as soon as I started catering what I offer to trombones, they all kind of swarmed to it because it's so needed. Right. And it's been crazy the amount of response that I've been receiving. I've taught yoga for trombones at Northwestern University, which is an incredible music school. Wow. A trombonist in the Vienna Philharmonic shared one of the videos that I posted. And so it's really, really cool that people are seeing this as something that is necessary and beneficial for musicians.
So one of the things that I've observed, at least, and like you're starting yourself deep in your niche, and then you're slowly coming, panning out of that, because those are the people who are going to be the most bought in and who are the most targeted by your message. And then other classical musicians would, creep into that, and then
Right.
popular music musicians, and then it kind of grows and pans out, and we're kind of doing something a little parallel. So I have my thing in it, and it's starting with the rock musicians, right? And not only just rock musicians, but I'm interviewing some of my own influences and idols, and so that's is like straight and progressive rock and metal like that. It's very much in that niche, and then it's growing out, and here I am sitting with a classical musician, right? So
Yeah.
so I just project this moving outward. Like there's there's one hip hop artist that I was thinking to interview, and that's very much just taking the next step to spreading this further, and then maybe I'll move beyond musicians, and you know what I'm saying. So and as far as building a following around a niche like this, I think that's a good approach. Start with who would be the most close to what you're doing, and that might start with your colleagues and family and friends, and then move to the specialty that you're in, and then further outward.
Yeah. So right now, I mean, I'm very much comfortable with teaching trombonists because I'm a trombonist myself. I know physically how it feels to play the trombone. I know all of the ways in which trombone can be physically difficult, and I've worked through the trombone injury, and so I can really relate and help trombonists with their specific issues. My goal is to expand that to all instruments. I know about piano because I'm a pianist as well, but I don't know anything about violin, but I can guess by looking at them when they're playing the physical issues that they might run into.
Right.
I taught the saxophone studio at my university this past semester, and so it was really cool to be able to talk to them and what is specific to playing saxophone that I might not necessarily know about that's causing you issues. And for them, it's the neck strap and all of the weight that's hanging off of their neck. And so I'm learning as I'm expanding all of the different little parts of each instrument. And then I take my yoga tools and I can apply that and help them through yoga relieve any of those issues that they might be experiencing.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, and I love what you're up to. And there is a strong need for it and a strong place for it in our, in the careers of musicians, and and how they can play without pain, as you advocate. So if there would be what's like a good, that I'm assuming that's partially a long-term goal for your career to to expand to more and more instruments, and do you have any other ideas that you want to implement, like with time?
Yeah, basically things that don't exist yet, but
Sure.
I'm working on it. It's exciting. This has kind of already started happening, but I strongly believe that in 10 years, every music institution is going to be required to give their students some type of health course, whether that's, a class that freshmen can take on performance anxiety and how to deal with that, or just like a general health class. For me, that would look like a yoga for musicians class that is offered to all of the students at the university that are musicians. And so this is happening at a handful of schools now. There are a few schools that offer yoga for musicians courses that music students can actually enroll in. And I think that's going to just spread and start to be everywhere in all music institutions. So I'd love to teach yoga for musicians at the university level and kind of just be a university's health coach for their musicians.
Sure. So how do you see your role in that? And like, do you see yourself maybe having some kind of big part in the expansion of this?
Yeah. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm just trying to promote this as much as I can, so as many people as possible can know about what I'm doing. Like this summer, I'm teaching yoga at the International Trombone Festival, so that's really exciting. And then I'm starting small with traveling and teaching workshops at universities. So I've taught yoga for trombones at multiple universities, and that hopefully will expand to me traveling and teaching yoga to a larger group of musicians. And then someone seeing that as like, we need this in our music school, and hiring me on full time as a yoga for musicians teacher.
Great. Great. Do you see yourself releasing any kind of product, such as maybe kind of videos for, that people could kind of purchase, like as an online download, or some course on Udemy, or even some subscription service?
Yeah, well, right now I do have videos on YouTube, and so those are free and accessible to everyone. I would love to be a little bit more specific with that and offer either yoga classes that are catered specifically to an individual. So someone can approach me and I will give them a yoga class, and we'll have a consultation and give them a yoga class that is very specific to their needs as a musician. I definitely plan on releasing some books in the future.
Sure.
And I have started writing. October, I will have my first wellness column in the International Trombone Association Journal.
Wonderful.
And so that's a way that I'm also getting my content out there.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. So if you had one message you could share with all musicians, what would it be?
Listen to your body.
Nice.
Listen to your body. Be very in tune with what your body's telling you, because your body is telling you what it needs. And we can be so out of tune and out of touch with that and ignore that so often. But if we really listen in, our body's going to tell us what it needs. And usually that's to slow down, to release tension, to breathe.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, Amelia Rosenberger, it's been awesome having you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think this is going to be very useful for people, and maybe we can catch up in some time with another interview and see, how this is progressing, because it's in its infancy, and I think there's a lot of good things to come.
Absolutely.
All right. You have a good day, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.